Scott is an associate at Alliance Engineering in Minneapolis. He has a diverse background in traffic engineering, has been involved in a wide variety of traffic studies, design, and operation projects throughout his work in both the public and private sectors. Prior to joining Alliance, he was a traffic operations engineer at the city of Minneapolis. Scott has actively been involved in all levels of ITE since he was a student at Iowa State, including participation in leadership ITE in 2017. NCITE president in 2018 and Great Lakes District ITE president in 2022. 2025, he was awarded the Transportation Professional Year NCITE. Please give a welcome to Scott Posca.
It's picking up audio from.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's fun to be here at Minneapolis. This is, a few of you, this is one of my favorite breweries in the Twin Cities. So I've drank a lot of beer here. Not doing that today, maybe another time. But in any case, I'm here to present on the University Street Roadway Improvements project, which opened in the fall of 2025. University Avenue and 4th Street, it's 2 roadways, county roadways. So I served as a traffic analysis and design lead for the project. Project limits go from I-35W on the west side all the way to Oak Street on the east side. Yeah, I'm gonna need that. Thank you. There's 26 intersections that were part of the project. 16 of those were signalized. Obviously, this goes through the heart of the University of Minnesota. Over 60,000 students there at the university and about 15,000 staff and faculty. There's also 3 of the top 9 largest event venues in the state. Princeton Big Stadium, Mariucci, Fieldhouse, I don't know the name of the Fieldhouse, and Ritter and a few of the other venues there. So a lot going on here. So we put together a little promo video for this for a award application. So I select it in here. Hopefully it plays in audio.
The University project runs to the heart of campus, a vibrant hub for students, businesses, and the community. I'm Andrew Miller, a senior at the University of Minnesota and an intern in Alliance Transportation Design Group. Improvements include dedicated turn lanes, a 2-way bike lane, ADA-friendly sidewalks, and upgraded transit platforms with heated bus shelters. This corridor sees thousands of people every day. It connects us to classes, local shops, entertainment, music venues, and Gopher dance. This project matters because it reflects a shared commitment from the county, the city, the university, Metro Transit, and the line to make our communities safer and more accessible for all. And as both a student and an employee owner at Alliance, it's exciting to help create projects that truly make a difference in the community.
Many of us in this industry started right here at the University of Minnesota. Proud to do that by creating a safer, more connected campus so we can all show that Gopher pride.
God, you love.
There we go. So I'm going to go through the overview of the project as a whole, ultimately arrive at what the goals of the project were. Then go into some more detail on the traffic components, traffic analysis piece. It did my toe a little bit in some of the final design, not a lot. I wasn't really involved heavily in the roadway design piece of it. And then with the project size, I was scratching my head at what the right number of key takeaways were. I came up with a few, so we'll go through those at the end. So, project this large had a massive amount of stakeholders, and obviously a project this size also had a large consultant team. So Mike was the lead consultant. We handled the project management, the traffic components, prelim engineering, final design of the University Avenue stretch. And our counterpart SRF led the public engagement, drainage, and some of those environmental things. And then final design on Fourth. We also had Alta Planning and Design, and they did peer review of some of the multimodal elements in prelim and final design. And finally, Broad Intertech was involved in phases 1 and 2 of the environmental process. They did all the geotechnical investigation and reporting. So on the stakeholder side, this project was led by Hennepin County, both their roadways, of course. City of Minneapolis had their hands deep in this because all the majority of the streets that intersected were county streets and roads. We had MnDOT at the far west end of the corridor because they had their ramps tied to 35W that we were impacting. Metro Transit was involved. They operated 18 transit routes along these 2 streets. And they also had the planned E-line BRT that we had to account for in our project. Last but not least, certainly not least at all, was the University of Minnesota. They had a massive amount of input, given that this is right out their front door, essentially. So, project got underway in 2016 when the county decided to perform a bikeway study to try and identify ways to make the bike routes on these 2 streets protected. And I'll show you later, they had striped in bike lanes, but they didn't have any type of protection or delineation. So the study was starting point for the project. And at the time, the study explored 2 different options. One was a 2-way protected bikeway on the south side of University. And the second was a 1-way protected bikeway on University and Fourth. So the study concluded in 2017 and recommended the 1-way bikeways. In 2018, the county applied for federal funding through regional solicitation. And they were ultimately successful in securing about $5.5 million of the almost $10 million estimated construction costs at the time for 2022 construction. County then released an RFP for prelim and final design. And that's where the consultant team, obviously, and myself got heavily involved. That was in 2019. So I'm going to go in a little more depth, the time warp here that's on the overview between 2019 and 2021, 22 and that. But in 2021, we received municipal approval for the layout. And then we had a sprint to get design plans done in the spring of 2022, at which point came the realization that we needed a program year extension to get all this completed in time. So we got the program year extension and figured out that we wanted to put it out for bid in 2020, later in 2023, once we could fully incorporate the E-line construction or proposed construction plans. So then this went out for bid in late 23, and then phase 1 construction started in 24, concluded late last year, like I said. So I talked about those existing conditions, just maybe hinted at it a few minutes ago. So I just kind of want to set the stage for at least what I was getting involved in when we won the project and we were starting in our preliminary design. And so like I said, the first thing to see here, back in, I think it was 2012 or 13, I was looking back at the street view. The city painted on-street bike lanes, but they weren't protected in any way. They weren't delineated with particular delineators or anything. So it was sort of given the volume of users out there, it seemed to be fairly uncomfortable facility. So that was one of the driving factors behind the project. The next is that there are spots along these 2 corridors that didn't have ADA compliant pedestrian facilities and that. So these are wonderful examples, I guess, but you get the picture that everything out there is just kind of dated, needed to be refreshed. This really surprised me when I did a field visit to scope out the extent of the condition of the traffic signals. I came across the pole base here on the right. I could put my whole hand in through the underside, and you know, if I wanted to grab the wiring in that, I could. Not the safest thing out there, that's for sure. So, you know, a lot of these signals were built in the early 90s, so they're pretty much at the end of their useful life. So not surprising that we want to come in and replace a lot of those. The last thing is with a corridor of this age, you can have a lot of portions of the roadway that don't have great pavement or even curves and that. So certain places are kind of a checkerboard of pavement patching and rehab and that that certainly use a refresh. So obviously, with this being outside of the University of Minnesota campus, you're gonna find a lot of different transportation modes. I think of all the projects I've worked on, it's by far had the most complex number of transportation modes. The picture here, I love this picture because you have probably about 3/4 of them. What we don't see are those newer like the Lime scooters or those electric scooters. And then our designer at us, or Align at the time, was a big, I guess those single tire balance bike things. And you know, I was out on site to observe the signal conditions, and there were a bunch of those whizzing by, and so there's just a lot going on here. I think the point here, though, is that all these different modes mix between being on the roadway and being on the sidewalk, or being on the bicycle facilities that were there before we started the project. So I pulled out some of the parking and transportation services statistics for the mode share that's out there, and you can see in the yellow we have a lot of vehicles still, but there are a number of bicyclists, obviously, and then a really good portion of you know, transit users in that. So it was kind of interesting to look at how what the mode splits actually are out there. You can start to make a case for needing something that's going to be putting more emphasis on those non-motorized users, and that I'll get into that here in a minute. Probably it's hard for me to see. I can't imagine you can see. I've got two maps on here that show the pedestrian counts that the city of Minneapolis does periodically, as well as bike counts. So it's not really going to matter what you're seeing there, but the darker the color means the higher the count. So really came in a situation where this is like a top 5 bicycle and pedestrian facility or roadway and facility in that in the city. So there's just a ton of those non-motorized users. So another driving factor behind this project was to provide some connectivity to some of the other neighboring or intersecting bicycle facilities in the city, and most notably, you have the 10th Avenue bikeway, as well as the proposed future connection to the Oak Street bikeway. But the proposed protected bike lanes on University 4th would provide some of that connectivity for those users. Like I said earlier, going into the project, the county knew that Metro Transit was planning to operate the BRT along University and Fourth. There were 3 proposed stations at the time. And when I say at the time, I meant preliminary engineering phase. Obviously, we know E-line opened late last year. But at the time, there were 3 proposed stations along our 2 roadways. So we had to work closely with Metro Transit to include the BRT in the traffic analysis, and then ultimately incorporate some of the things that Metro Transit needs for BRT in the final design. So like I said, all this kind of culminates in what the project goals are. And so, when I try to come up with these goals, it's pretty simple to say, well, we want to improve the bike mobility. We want to increase access to transit. Want to enhance the multimodal safety of the corridor. All that in balance with each other, with trying to retain effective traffic operations. And then the last goal that was really interesting about this project that came into play more in final design, I guess. But there's a number of historic buildings related to U of M that are right adjacent to the corridor, or right adjacent to university, that is. The main one that we had to contend with a lot was the fence that is on university on like the south side. I don't remember the exact limits of that, but it's several blocks. And so when you try to start thinking of ideas on how to work a lot of this in, really constrained by not deviating beyond the current footprint of what's built within the right of way. Right? Sometimes you can, if you're trying to do a improvement project, you're afforded the luxury of being able to go outside of those right of way limits, so you can incorporate everything you want to do. So that proved to be pretty challenging in general. So a lot of those goals really center around the complete streets concept. And so I found this picture that we took. I think we took this in summer 2019 when we were pursuing the project. And it really struck me how dominant the motor vehicle space is out there, or what it was out there. And on the right, I clipped the image of the city of Minneapolis's road priority pyramid, I guess you want to say. And because these facilities were built, or last reconstructed in like the 90s, complete streets really weren't a big thing then. And so they did have facilities for pedestrians, and we did have a facility for bikes, but it wasn't until it was more auto dominated. And in this is a great example where you see that bus on the left side at the bus stop, and that bus is actually encroaching onto the straight bike lanes that were there at the time. So in Minneapolis's priority of modes, we really want to try and provide more space for bikes and transit, maybe not have them competing for space if we can. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody about the complete streets piece of it. We're going to come back to this here at the end. So I'm going to go through like I said, the traffic analysis. Do this somewhat quickly, I guess, but we had a data collection component to this, big traffic forecasting component, and then pretty large component of trying to analyze alternatives. So we'll start with the data collection. It's pretty easy. Everybody remembers this time in 2020. I distinctly remember sitting at the U of M for the kickoff meeting right around this time, late March. It was mid-March. Like 3 days later, the whole world changed. Well, in my scope, I had asked to collect multimodal turning movement counts in like April. So we went out there to put our cameras out, and my data collector said, "Well, not a whole lot of traffic out here." I'm like, "Hey, right." That was a big deal. In all reality, I had this person go out and just observe what was going on. He didn't have all the cameras. I knew it wasn't going to be what it normally is, but we kind of wanted to gauge if it was going to be worth it or not. It certainly wasn't. I think these pictures were taken around 9 a.m. on University, which usually it's like really busy. So we decided to try and pool together resources from the University, Parking and Transportation Services, the county, the city, or anyone else that had count data that we could use for this. So we were able to locate some historical count data from 2016. Stopgap. We did also pull historical count data from the city. And when we plotted that out, it was kind of interesting to see how traffic volume out there was either kind of either steady or slightly declining. So that was a big point of conversation amongst the stakeholders. And what we decided to do was take the 2016 counts that we had, just increase them by 0.5% annually. To get out to 2040 is to have a conservative analysis. In all reality, with things declining out there and improving access to transit and promoting the bike facilities, probably going to continue to decline a little bit. This is early 2020, and it has a lot of options. So, like I said, I plotted out. Actually, like to plot this out. I think we just plotted out the 2016 traffic volume data over the course of the day to kind of prove to everybody that we were going to be analyzing and really capturing that. What the takeaway here that I saw though was how university volumes tend to jump up very early in the day. And they do drop off, but it kind of maintain a fairly steady rate. Fourth, it's a little bit different where volume starts out pretty low in the day and it just creeps up throughout the day before it cuts off. So just a few takeaways on the traffic piece, traffic patterns. Okay, so I'm not going to bore everybody with all the results of all these different alternatives, but trust me, there was a lot of alternatives, and I was looking through some things to prep for this presentation. I found even more alternatives that I didn't even put on here. But I think the takeaway here is that we wanted to analyze very specific things in relation to the roadway and the bike facilities that were proposed. And so as you move across from left to right, probably hard to see, but I try to bold the differences between some of these alternatives. The big thing here is when we got to the second alternative that we wanted to investigate, that was a lane drop at 15th. So county and the city were interested in trying to do some sort of a road diet. And so they thought, well, maybe we can carry 3 lanes from 35W to 15th and then drop a lane at 15th and have 2 lanes continue to the east towards Oak. With that particular scenario, we analyzed that in synchro, and the model basically locked up. It couldn't even run it because it was so over capacity. So I really said, well, maybe that's not a good idea. So we thought, well, maybe what if we drop a lane a couple blocks east at 17th? Tried that, and then ultimately we did that in Beeson. And hey, that worked great. But we had a few little bumps in the road over at University and 10th. So we did another scenario where we tried to smooth out some of that and tried a few different lane configurations. That seemed to work pretty good. And all of these, I should have said earlier, all these were consistent with what was in the regional suspicion application. So from about maybe late 21, late 2020, I guess, sorry. The city came to us and was all of a sudden very interested in reopening the two-way bike idea on University. And so that got us to Alt 5 here with the one-way and two-way bike lanes that I tried to put in my silly matrix here. So that was pretty late in the game, and it deviated from both the protected bike study recommendations as well as the regional cessation application. So there was some gymnastics we had to do with state aid to see if we can deviate from that. And then from an analysis side, I was left with trying to figure out how to analyze potential two-way bike lane, bike facility, when we all along had been planning on a one-way. It had counts for a one-way, all those things. My head was spinning through that process quite a bit. I've been wanting to use this gift for this presentation forever. But you can imagine, that was over the course of like a year trying to analyze these different options and then reporting the results to the stakeholders so we could get some input and buy-in on everything. It took a lot. So ultimately, this is where Elaine Bennis would say yada yada. We got to the point where state aid was going to allow us to deviate from that regional cessation application to do the two-way bikeway facility on University and then the one-way on 4th. So this is a video showing the Beeson model of that final alternative, I guess, to say. And like I said, we used synchro to screen a lot of these to see if they would even get off the ground. Synchro is great because you can do things fairly quickly, get decent results. Problem with synchro, though, like everybody knows, is you can't model BRT. Can't really model, bike operations like this. And there's a lot of PEDs doesn't really do the greatest. It's really meant for vehicles, right? So we did Beeson to try and get a better handle on what we would be potentially dealing with the proposed alternative that we had. And like everybody knows, Beeson is very user intensive, a lot of inputs that have to go into it, but the more effort that you put into it, the better results you get out of it. So that was pretty cool. It turned out pretty good, and we used this video for a few of the public outreaches that we had for the project. So the two-way bike lane, there are a couple of considerations that we had to think through with this. On the one hand, really great idea to start thinking about converting university in our minds from the one-way concept to the two-way. Because the city and the university had noted that there were a lot of contraflow riders in the bike facilities there before we got involved. So and obviously the two-way can certainly help those wrong-way riders, provide them a safe place to operate. Obviously you can have better connection to the other bike facilities I mentioned before, as well as those university destinations. Challenges though, safety is a huge thing. You're dealing with contraflow of bikes, with a really busy street right adjacent to it. Certainly invites a lot of opportunity for conflicts in that. And the intersection operation is kind of complex. So here's my last difficult matrix, I guess. I didn't put a gift for this one, but so we thought of 3 different ways that we could try and safely handle the major modes at signalized intersections along University with proposed two-way bikeway. The first was to essentially do nothing out of the ordinary that we would normally do, aside from providing few red, yellow, green vehicle type indications for contraflow bikes. So if you're going in the direction of vehicle travel, you'd see the regular vehicle indications and ped indications. For contraflow, you'd see vehicle indications and the complementary ped indications. The second option that we thought of was, well, why don't we see if we can incorporate some bike signals, some bike indications. And so it'd be very similar to option 1, except we would, instead of having red, yellow, green indications for the bikes, we have red, yellow, green bike indications. And the way that would operate for the METCD would be to have the vehicles accommodated through signal phasing, and then have the bikes be in their own exclusive phase. Because you can't have a green bike indication on with a green ball. So the third option that we thought of was to mirror off of what was recently installed on Jackson Street in St. Paul. Has a two-way bike facility on a street right adjacent to it, and they have flashing yellow bike arrows in conjunction with flashing bike indications for the bikes. And our twist on that was that we thought there wasn't much purpose for a flashing bike. We thought maybe we could get away with a green bike indication with a flashing yellow right arrow. And of course, that would still require RTE through the feds, just like St. Paul did with Jackson Street. The city and the county weren't overly wild about going down the RTE process, especially given the city's experience with the Washington Avenue bike facility and subsequent bike facing that was there. So really, that kind of ruled out option 3. Option 2, nothing wrong with it until you start looking at the capacity implications of that for vehicles, and having to add an extra 10, 15 seconds to the cycle length for specific or exclusive bike fades was really going to start to impact operations. And I think the other important thing that I realized here is that we're on a university campus, a lot of college students in that traveling. How many of them are going to realistically obey a red bike indication while the vehicles are green right adjacent to them and pedestrians are crossing, right? It's just not realistic. So we selected option 1. And so that was ultimately what was built up there. So I'm going to move into final design. I thought I had a picture on the slide. I guess it's missing. Oh, there it is. Okay. We're going to go to final design. So I'm going to talk quick about the roadway design piece, bikeway design, some of those bike ped shared spaces, and signal design. Just quick. So we fast forward and we got into final design. We're trying to figure out all the dimensions for all of our elements to this. We ended up with 3 travel lanes, and this is for university. There's, well, it seems like almost every block there's a different cross section. You get the picture. So the 3 travel lanes, we have the 2-way bikeway on the south side. It's 10 feet wide with a 2-foot buffer. And then we have those 6-foot sidewalks. Also have the 4-foot boulevards on either side. So we kind of going between what the county really wanted for a cross section, the city really wanted, and then what state aid minimums were for all these things. It's kind of a circus. But this is what we ended up with for university. When we look at locations where there's an E-line BRT stop, what we've done is eliminate the boulevards on either side. And then slightly widen the bikeway in this sidewalk a bit, squeeze in like a 12-foot wide space for the BRT platform. So we have the 2-way bikeways 10 feet wide, remove the boulevards to fit in the platform, and then sidewalk that's 1 foot wider. So sense of scale of how you're trying to fit all this in is really kind of a puzzle. For the bikeway design, the 2-way bike is generally like 10 feet wide on university, and then that includes right behind the bus platforms. There are a few short sections that are 8 foot wide, 12 feet wide, and even 15 feet wide. And then the 1-way on 4th is 6 feet wide. So we applied a buffer curb design that I've got a schematic for here, and then I'll show some pictures of what it turned out like. But that's 2 feet wide, and it's placed adjacent to the travel lanes. Thank you. This section of curb was somewhat modular, so we could provide gaps for people on 4th Street that parked on street to be able to cut across the curb and get to the sidewalk. Now, it looks like this. So I'm talking about like these gaps right here in that modular curb design. Is that better? There we go. Yeah. Give me a beer too. This is just another view of the that modular curb design for protection for the bike facility. There are a couple driveways that intersected the 2-way bike facility, and we went round and around and around with the university and the county and the city as to how to properly mark those and sign those so vehicles in those driveways would not cause a safety issue. Being surprised by somebody coming from the right and from the left. So what we ended up with were some of those yield to pedestrian signs that they're not in the picture here, but those are in a few spots. And then obviously we put the green bikeway markings across the driveway. Now this is at the grade of the driveway. So when the on-street facility had to actually ramp up to be at the same grade as the driveway. One of those goals of the project that we were talking about earlier wanted to improve the shared spaces for bikes and peds. So I thought this picture is really cool of right at the epicenter there at University and 15th. So the design that we came up with accounted for these shared spaces by having colored concrete for some of the bike facilities. Obviously had really wide crosswalks, brought curbs out to maximize the space for pedestrians. Really necked up the curb radii to maximize that space even more. So all in all, you'll see a comparison here in a second. I think we really accomplished that with this project. This is just another image showing that colored concrete for the bike facility down towards, I think this is down towards 19th, over by the field house. So again, nice. This is where we dropped to 2 lanes. So there's a lot more real estate to really increase the space for the bikes and the peds. For signal design, like I said, there are 16 signalized intersections. Myself and another colleague from Alliant went out one day in spring of 21 and walked the whole corridor and took inventory of the condition of the signals, and ultimately figured out that really needed like 12 new signals entirely, and then 4 of them we thought could be revised. So we just salvaged what was there and brought in some new parts, but those were definitely revisions in that. The project also included installing interconnect along both corridors, and then quite a bit of roadway lighting improvements throughout. So the final engineer's estimate at the time of the regional solicitation application was like about $10 million. When the dust all settled for this, the price tag was coming in around $14 million. There was some gap that stakeholders had to work out amongst themselves as to how we're gonna, or is our mouth bigger than our stomach? I keep turning it off. So like I said, construction is completed in 2025, and then the E-line opened in 2025 as well. So I get back to the complete streets that I was talking about before. This is that same picture. We have, I think, is a very auto-dominated type of a profile cross-section. And this is almost the same vantage point today. Instead of the parking lane, we've widened out the sidewalk on the south side, and then provided the space for the bike facility. Now the bus is sharing space with one of the vehicle lanes. Still not great, but when we tried exclusive transit lanes, and that didn't get anywhere back when we were doing the alternatives analysis. And then you can see these corners, like I said, with the tighter radii, curb extended out more, really try to maximize the space that we had at each of the corners. Okay, so those key takeaways I was alluding to earlier. So the first is, we had a large number of stakeholders with this project, and then, from the time that I got started in 2019 until this was built, late 25, that was 6 years. So there were a lot of things along the way that we documented as far as decisions that were reached through PMT meetings or other stakeholder meetings. However, there are plenty of things that, thinking in like 2021, well, I don't need to write that down, or what am I going to need to look back on this for? Well, 3 or 4 years later, here we are trying to rehash the same conversation. So I wish I had a little bit better documentation in certain aspects of this project, I think, for sure. That also makes it easier to prepare for a presentation to you guys 6 years later. The second thing is, I had alluded to earlier about some of the pros and cons of the one-way versus two-way bike facility.
You know, I think there was definitely some resistance by some of the stakeholders to even entertain the idea of deviating from that the one-way pair concept that was in the funding application to go with the two-way and the one-way. And I was kind of one of them initially, and then I was thinking about it more, and the fact that there's so many with the facility that's provided on university, there'd be nothing really stopping anybody from riding contraflow in our protected bike facility. So it really made sense to me that got to try and accommodate what's actually going to probably take place out there as best we can. It didn't really make any sense to really stick to exactly what was in that funding app. And then the last thing are bike signals, and I think there's a perception by some colleagues out there that whenever you have a bike facility on a roadway like this, really should be thinking about having bike indications or bike phasing, and even more so with a two-way facility. When you get down to it and what the MUTCD requires of the use of those bike indications, I think this is a good example of a project that is proving that bike users should be able to understand where their priority level is and when it's appropriate to enter the intersection by following the vehicle indications or the ped indications. I don't think there's a real big need to have those separate bike indications out there. But I don't know, maybe that'll set some people off here, but I kind of went around and around on this, and it seemed like it get brought up every PMT meeting, and trying to explain that there's multiple options, and ultimately I think we made the right decision and not having those, not making it more complicated for those users. So that's all I got. So I guess let's open up to questions. I guess I went pretty much right at 40 minutes.
I hear you right, that says that at the same time.
Yes.
So why is
so the question is, does the MUTCD require the green ball to be on at a separate time as a green bike? And that is the case from my understanding of this. And I'm 5 years removed from looking this over, but that is my understanding, because I think that the reasoning is that on a green ball, vehicles aren't accustomed to yielding to bikes. They're accustomed to yielding to peds, not bikes for some reason. And so the thought is, when a green bike indication is shown, that you're giving the bike the right of way without having to worry about any of those types of conflicts. I wonder if somebody might invent like a white bike indication instead of green, but Mike. Yep. The PTS statistics. Parking and Transportation Services statistics. Yeah, so the question was the breakdown of the modes that I shared in the first 10 slides or so. It's weird talking into this without a person there, but. Max. They were. Well, so they were a invited participant at all the I want to say they're at all the PMT meetings. I think the question is how is the university involved? So I think everyone has worked with, or maybe has heard of Sandy Cullen. She and Ross Allenson and Eric, I can't remember his last name. They had a representative. I want to say a representative at almost every step of the way. I did have some one-on-one meetings with the county specifically to explain some of the options for the two-way bike signal phasing options, so that we could try to get some buy-in from the client to then make the right pitch at the next like PMT meeting. And then in turn, there were side conversations between the city and the county to work out, the funding gap, work out some of the details on the two-way bike and some other design specific related things. So if you look at our meetings folder for this, it's probably like 40 folders worth over the 3-4 year period. That's a lot. Yes. Yep. So the question is, is there any statistics on the effectiveness of the colored concrete for the bike facility? I'm not aware of any, but I'm sure there's literature out there.